Certain NFL teams are currently going through some weird times. Today, let's talk about the 5 teams who, in my opinion, have dark futures. Now, when making this list, there are several teams who I wanted to include on this list. However, I'm talking about teams that aren't looking up right now. For example, the Carolina Panthers are not going to be a part of this video because you have your franchise quarterback, you have some younger pieces, as well as some incoming talent, so things are generally starting to look up for that team. Same thing sort of applies with the LA Chargers, who are also not a part of this video. They got their new head coach, they already have their quarterback, they're disassembling their roster to eventually get this roster heading in the right direction. The teams on this list are teams that are currently going through the process of either losing a ton of talent and not bringing in new ones, or they're just simply bad. So without further ado and without too many explanations, let's start this list. At number 5, we have the Denver Broncos, a team with, let's be honest, nothing going for it outside of maybe Sean Payton. But even then, I'm not the biggest Sean Payton fan, and as much as I think he is a good head coach, I don't think he's going to be able to carry this horrible roster to any sort of relevancy anytime soon. We all already know about the Russell Wilson situation. We all already know how much the Denver Broncos are paying him to not be on their roster. But when you look at the entirety of the roster, it's a pretty bad team. Now, yes, I think there's some good players on the defense, and yes, I think the offensive line isn't the worst in the NFL. And yeah, I like Courtland Sutton. Everything else generally is really bad. You also are more than likely rocking with Jarrett Stidham next year, which, by the way, I think is the right move. I do think tanking 1 year is the right move for them to acquire more talent this year, suck next year, get a top 5 pick, get a top 5 player next year, and then get your quarterback hopefully next year in some sort of way, because I don't think this team is built at all for a guy like Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy to go to them. This is a Broncos team who currently is disassembling a lot of their pieces, guys like Jerry Jeudy and of course Russell Wilson, and are trying to bring in some young talent in this upcoming draft. However, there's just not a lot of really good things going on for this team. You can look back when Peyton Manning left this team, that's when this team should have disassembled everything, maybe give or take a few years because you had Brock Osweiler for those couple years. But around that time, you should have disassembled everything to reset so that you could be a really good team now. However, they kept trying to hit on different quarterbacks, none of them hit, and well, here we are today. Similar to the Denver Broncos, our 4th team is a team that has just never given up on their glory years, the New Orleans Saints. The Saints are about as mediocre as they come, and truth be told, I think they're one of those franchises that just doesn't realize that they are the laughingstock of the NFL. With Drew Brees and Sean Payton, the Saints were one of the best teams in the NFL. They consistently won high-level games, made deep playoff runs. Hell, they won an NFL Super Bowl. But it seems like they're holding on and grasping to those moments as best they can by bringing in unrelevant players like Chase Young, Derek Carr, and so many others to fill this roster with just complete mediocrity. Yes, there's some young players on this team who I like. Chris Olave, Brian Bresee. Those are some good players. And yes, they actually have a relatively decent defense with a lot of really good pieces. But regardless of that, even if they are hypothetically not bad next year, they're not going to be even close to winning a championship. And with teams like the Atlanta Falcons and hopefully eventually the Carolina Panthers picking up their side of things, this Saints team is just going to continue to fall within their division. I don't understand the direction this team is going. They're negative who knows how many $1 million in cap space right now. They kept Derek Carr. In fact, I believe they are going to be working on a potential new contract for him, which is just bizarre. As I mentioned, they just brought in Chase Young, and listen, shout out to Chase Young. I think that's a good spot for him to go to get that bag. But for the Saints, it makes zero sense at all. And now you're heading into next year with more questions than answer, and yet you still haven't made the big change at the quarterback position or the head coach position. I think they think in their mind that Derek Carr and Dennis Allen can get the job done, but I hate to break it to you, it's not going to happen. But now we get to 3 teams who are really, really good and full of talent, but they're heading in the wrong direction. These are 3 teams who have made deep playoff runs, some more than others, and have won a lot of games, but they're heading in the wrong direction, and we gotta talk about it. But at number 3, we gotta talk about the Buffalo Bills. Now, unlike a couple of these teams I'm gonna talk about here in just a second, I do see a way where the Bills could still be competent these next couple of years. With Josh Allen and some of their really good players on this team, they're gonna be a good team regardless. Do I love Stephon Diggs on this team? Not anymore. However, I understand their idea of keeping him. But after getting rid of stars like Mitch Morse, Tre'Davious White, and Jordan Poyer, you can clearly tell where this team is trying to go. They're trying to rebuild their roster and figure out what they gotta do. By opening up cap space in all those guys you cut, and opening up cap space with the Von Miller pay cut, and by having a relatively quiet offseason, they have made the right moves, and I think they're heading in the right direction in terms of their mindset. However, as a pure roster, it's very clear that they are not the same team that they were last year. Josh Allen, great player. The team in general still has a lot of talent, and yes, this team could clearly still be a championship contender within the next 5 years. However, they got a lot more questions to answer than they've had in any past offseason. When you look at this Bills roster, there's a lot of questions on this defense. There's also a lot of questions in the receiving room. There's also just the general question of, can they get over the hump of beating a team like the Kansas City Chiefs? And in totality, of course, I like Josh Allen, and of course, I think Stefon Diggs is a good player, but I look at a lot of these teams in the AFC, like the Houston Texans, the Indianapolis Colts, and many others, and I think that they are heading in a better direction right now than a team like the Buffalo Bills. Now, is that me saying that Buffalo isn't going to be making the playoffs anytime soon? No, I think that they will more than likely still have a chance to make the playoffs next year. However, last year you kind of saw this thing unraveling a little bit, and then of course they would go on to win some games and then figure it out somewhat in the playoffs. But if they couldn't figure it out last year with a much better roster, what makes me think they're going to be able to figure it out moving forward with a much worse roster? Again, with Josh Allen, I believe in them, but I still have a lot of problems with this roster and the general direction this team is going. Now, before we get to my number 2, I want to give a special shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest and fastest growing fantasy sports app available. I know the NFL season may be over, however, Underdog has plenty of ways to entertain us while we wait for the new season. You may not know this about me, but I am a massive NBA fan, and with Underdog's Pick'em games, I can earn some serious cash. Simply pick higher or lower on 2 to 5 player stats, and you'll have a chance to win up to 20 times your money in a single night. I personally love playing these Pick'em games on game day to spice up my afternoon. And all you have to do is use the link in the description below to sign up today using promo code MetroSports, and you can get your first deposit doubled up to $100 as well as an instant Pick'em special. Check the map on the screen right now to see if your state qualifies, and I want to give a massive thank you to Underdog for sponsoring today's video. Alright, let's now move on to number 2. At number 2, we gotta talk about them, the Dallas Cowboys. And I think my biggest question with this team is, what the hell are they doing? I understand not wanting to pay a lot of these guys that they've ended up losing. I understand not wanting to pay Dorrance Armstrong or Tyler Biadasz or Tony Pollard and give or take a couple players here and there. I can understand that. And yes, I understand that you have to pay your quarterback Dak Prescott, your number 1 wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, one of the best defensive players in Micah Parsons, Tyler Smith, so on and so forth. I get that. But they have money open to sign players for this upcoming season. They are going to let Stephon Gilmore walk. They're going to let Jonathan Hankins go to another team for damn near nothing. Their number 1 running back right now is Rico Dowdle. Do you guys know who Rico Dowdle is? I mean, I do, but a lot of people probably don't. And now some recent rumors and reports are saying that they're not going to give Dak Prescott the extension and that they're going to let him play out next year and figure out what they're going to do with him next year. Which, if you're asking me, is a horrible idea. Dak Prescott was second in MVP voting last year, and with the cap space growing and these quarterbacks getting paid more and more, even if Dak Prescott plays below the standard he played at this past year, if he's a top 10 quarterback but maybe not second in MVP voting, he's still going to get a massive contract worth close to $60 million. Because we just saw how much Kirk Cousins got paid, and Dak's way better than Kirk. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it at all, and Dallas, in my opinion, is screwing themselves over. My only understanding of what Dallas might be doing is that potentially they're trying to reset the talent pool on this roster, which to an extent I can understand that. You do already have a ton of talented players who are already in their prime. However, the extra players around them aren't up to the standard of those guys. So as an example, you're going to go into this year's draft, replace the left tackle, get a new running back, figure this and this position out, and then next year you're probably going to miss the playoffs or be right on the verge of missing the playoffs, but ultimately losing the playoffs. And then next year you bring in even more talent to go all in 2026, or sorry, 2025, or what would that be? The next year. And I get that, but I don't know. There's a lot of players on this Cowboys team that are in their prime, and I think wasting a year to try to reset the talent pool in your roster just doesn't make a ton of sense. This is a Cowboys team that can contend. In an NFC that is consistently getting better, they're getting passed up by a lot of these teams like the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. I don't understand what Dallas is doing. I got more questions than answers. But now we get to the number 1 team in this video, the Miami Dolphins. Now, what I'll say about the Miami Dolphins is I think they've actually done a good job of fixing a couple of their problems, getting guys like Jordan Poyer, Shaq Barrett, Jonnu Smith, Jordan Brooks, Isaiah Wynn, Kendall Fuller, Anthony Walker. Those are all very good signings. And in fact, I still think that next year Miami is still a really good roster. But losing a ton of really good players like Brandon Jones, Xavier Howard, a lot of their offensive linemen, Christian Wilkins, and still not getting that Tua Tagovailoa contract done does raise a lot of problems. And I think the inherent problem with the Miami Dolphins is Tua. I like Tua, and I think Tua is a borderline top 10 quarterback, but I also know and understand what his strengths and what aren't his strengths. I know that he by himself can't carry the Miami Dolphins when they need him to. And I know that when the Miami Dolphins are not playing spectacular defense and are not letting up 30 points, I know the Dolphins can win. But when this defense isn't playing up to their expectations, this Miami Dolphins team struggles. Now, the Dolphins can beat a lot of good teams. They can beat the Dallas Cowboys. They can beat the Buffalo Bills here and there. But are they ever going to beat the Chiefs, the Texans, those teams that are coming up? I don't think so. Again, I like the offseason they've had given their situation, but I still have a ton of question marks on this roster and just the general direction of this team. Because in my opinion, their biggest question mark is at the quarterback position, and until they figure that position out, I don't really see how this team can get that much better. Like, I'll ask you guys this. Do you guys see a path where this Miami Dolphins team, with all the talent they have, can win a championship? Because I don't. I don't think they're going to beat a lot of these teams that are coming up. Like, I think Houston is going to be a very good team next year. I think Indianapolis is going to be a very good team next year. And I think both those teams clear the Miami Dolphins. And yes, the Dolphins could win a playoff game here and there, and they can look dominant at times. But when it comes down to it, are they going to be able to win a championship? I don't think so. Now, maybe I've just fallen into the stigma surrounding this team and that I should give them a fair chance under fair conditions in the playoffs. But it's been 2 years and your roster is getting worse, and it's not going to get any better because you still have a lot of money to hand out. Now, the one bright side for this team is that yes, there's still talent, and what they do have is a front office and a head coach who's uber aggressive in getting this team to become better. So unlike the Dallas Cowboys with Jerry Jones, I actually have faith in the front office of the Miami Dolphins to actually figure out their problems. But with that being said, I still have a ton of question marks, and I'm sure you guys do too. Now, this is going to be a part 1 to the dark futures that I have moving forward. I'm making a part 2 about the top 5 teams with the brightest futures in just a couple days. So if you guys want to see that, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.